24 years after her death, Princess Diana remains one of the world's most beloved figures.
Royal commentator Angela Mollard looks back at the life and legacy of the royal rebel who left an enduring imprint on the House of Windsor.
24 years after her death, Princess Diana remains one of the most iconic members of the royal family. We wonder at times, what sort of woman would she have been? She would have been celebrating her 60th birthday this year, and it's hard to imagine that a woman who died at the age of 36, who was in the prime of her life, becoming a grandmother, a mother to grown-up children. She would have seen the marriages of her sons and the birth of her grandchildren. And I think many of us this year will be contemplating the loss of a woman who really did capture the public's imagination, as she was so tenderly described at the time, the people's princess. Years from now, the story of Lady Diana Spencer will be one that we'll still be talking about and telling. She completely modernised the royal family. She came in a breath of fresh air. She had a job in a nursery school. She had friends and flatmates. She was funny, she was playful, she loved dancing, she loved music. She was this delightful, very young 19-year-old woman who obviously captured the Prince of Wales's attention, and she in turn fell deeply in love with him. Whether or not he did, we don't know.
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Now, a lot of women would run at that moment, but Diana was absolutely beguiled by Prince Charles, and by the time she started to have questions about that relationship, as she told her sister, my face was already on the tea towels. Of course, they had a splendid wedding at St Paul's Cathedral. That dress, that train that went on for miles, that shy, coquettish look, the kiss on the balcony. I mean, it was a huge fairy tale love story. We wanted to believe it. Here was a prince who was going to be the heir to the throne, and he had met this absolutely beautiful young woman who had this ability to communicate with ordinary people. She would go into hospitals. She was one of the first to talk to AIDS patients, to put her hands on them, to hug them. The same with leprosy sufferers. She had a natural warmth, a sense of compassion, empathy, and she just captured the public imagination like no one else.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
She was this princess, and yet she was also this every mother. She took her children to theme parks. She drove to McDonald's with them. She didn't want them out of her sight. They was the first generation to take royal children on tour, as we saw so memorably in Australia. So Diana resonated because she was this princess, but she was every other mother.
Because I believe that I have a role to fulfill, and I got 2 children to bring up.
Diana was also captivating because she was like a fashion model. She had the height, she had these long legs, these tremendous shoulders, this gorgeous blonde hair, and designers loved her. Everyone from Armani to Yves Saint Laurent, they all wanted to have Diana in their outfits. Of course, she favoured British designers, but she wore a spectrum. She also created trends, pussy bows, knickerbockers, those big collars in those maternity dresses. She was like the queen. She loved wearing colour. And I thought one of the loveliest stories about Diana in fashion is at one point she said, what am I going to do with all these dresses? And she was having a conversation with Prince William, and he said, well, why don't you auction them off? This is not long before her death. And they came up with the idea that they would auction these dresses off for charity, and William was involved in it. Diana did this wonderful thing, taking her dresses to New York, where they made a lot of money for charity. The relationship between William and Diana is actually really interesting, because while we know that the Queen and Prince Charles have been very instructive in terms of the role that Prince William will come to play as monarch, it was Diana that gave him the humanity, that has injected him with that compassion and that care for other people that we've seen, particularly through COVID. Both he and Kate have been at the front line of praising and discussing with NHS and healthcare workers about the work that they do. And that empathy is very interestingly being passed on to their own children. We saw George, Charlotte and Louis taking little care packages to elderly people living near their estate in Norfolk. As we think about Diana turning 60, this would have been her 60th birthday this year, we think about the woman she might have become. I think she would have retained that compassion.
I never tire of seeing those pictures.
No, lovely stuff.
Gorgeous. And we're wondering what form the statue will take, whether it will be Diana in a tiara as a princess, or maybe represented in a humanitarian form. Interesting.
Or maybe a dance move with John Travolta. We don't know. We just don't know.